And I'm so happy to share and to speak a bit now um, on this theme of wise intention. How many of you are familiar with this as an Eightfold Path factor? And, so yeah, love to see all the hands. And it's something that is it's such a profound factor in practice. Um, it's something that every time we practice, it just becomes the front and center kind of aspect in many ways. So I'll offer these words of support for your practice. And um, it was really nice. I was along with Melissa McKay. We co-taught the New Year's retreat for InsightLA, and it was about intentionality that New Year's time, right? So um, gathered my thoughts around it, and I'll be sharing a similar talk today around what I shared on the retreat. So I love to lead with this quote. Albert Einstein, he says, the main thing is to keep the main thing. What am I going to say? The main thing. Now you laugh because it's so profoundly simple. And yet, isn't it kind of clarifying when I say that? I wonder if you feel your system settle. And that is a little bit of what intentionality does provide. It really settles us in, drops us down. And it's the main thing. And we keep the main thing, like that thread. Wasn't that a great poem? I love that poem. So I guess what we're going to explore today is what's your main thing for practice? Why are you here? And it seems like, when we practice, just like we just did, so simple to be with the breath, to know the breath, to allow our awareness to rest completely in the experience of the breath and to become present through that experience, fully present. Seems very simple, doesn't it? And yet, it's not so simple. It can be tricky, right, everyone? So it takes a while, but there is one ingredient that really supports how our practice will unfold, how it will, and that is your heartfelt and sincere intention to be present in a particular way, which is what we're learning to do here. And intentionality, I'll just say, it's considered in the Buddhist cosmology, it's considered a common mental factor. There are about 52 of them in total. And some are wholesome, some are not. It's all these factors that we learn to know and understand. But few of these factors are present in every moment. There's only about a handful of them. And intentionality is one of those mental factors. Really hear what I'm saying, that are present in every moment. Intentionality, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, is being played out in our experience in every moment. Isn't that it? I mean, it's a really profound thing to acknowledge. So intention becomes really key in practice, and we want to bring it into awareness, into mindful awareness, and allow it to lead us into more and more freedom, into less suffering. The more we understand intentionality, the more we begin to understand why we're here in practice, of course, but also how this plays out in the unfolding of our life, into the course of our life. It plays a central role in this, whether we're aware of it or not. Once you understand the central factor of intentionality, there becomes this intentionality from a Buddhist perspective. It's often linked with the understanding of karma. And karma, very simply, is based on intention. Karma plays out directly from intention. And karma basically is this understanding of cause and effect. because this is this, that is that everything is constantly influencing each other in this flow of conditions that are unfolding in every moment. As we think, so we become. So all of this karma energetically is arising out of the intentional field of our mind heart, whether we're aware of it or not. So it's so important to understand it clearly, to know what the main thing is, right, everybody? To come back to it again and again. And to see the choice and the freedom in every moment when we can wake up through mindfulness, through this practice. It is said that the source of all of our suffering, as well as the suffering in the world, it makes me emotional to say this right now, because there's a lot of suffering. There always is, but there's a lot, is due to unwholesome karma, which comes out of intentions that are colored by greed, aversion, ignorance, and delusion. That's where it's all flowing from. That's the source of all our suffering. On the other hand, the source of all our freedom, our happiness, all the wholesome experiences of our life, these are actions that come out of intentions that are fed by the opposite of these. These are generosity and kindness and wisdom and insight and compassion and equanimity, benevolence. So every single moment, so I'll get, I want to quote this beautiful quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, every single moment, and he uses the metaphor, which I think is lovely, of planting seeds of gardening. Think about it. What if you brought to your mind the quality of a master gardener? That takes some training, right? And that every moment, what seed are you planting? For that will be the karmic expression of your life unfolding by the seeds that are being planted through the intention of the mind heart. So this is a beautiful quote from him using this planting of seeds. He says, consciousness exists on two levels, as seeds and as manifestations of these seeds. So the seeds are the intentions, manifestations is the karma, right? Suppose we have a seed of anger in us. When conditions are favorable, that seed may manifest as a zone of energy called anger. It is burning and it makes us suffer a lot. It is impossible to be joyful at the moment the seed of anger manifests. Every time a seed has an occasion to manifest itself, it produces new seeds of the same kind. When I smile, the seeds of smiling and joy come up. As long as they manifest, new seeds of smiling and joy are planted. But if I don't practice smiling for a number of years, that seed will weaken and I may not be able to smile anymore. There are many kinds of seeds in us, both good and bad. Every time we practice mindfulness, we plant healthy seeds and strengthen the healthy seeds already in us. We're pruning the unwholesome seeds, actively pruning and knowing, understanding the suffering it brings to ourselves and others. And we're pruning those, we're weeding those. If we plant wholesome, healing seeds, they will take care of the negative ones. Isn't that beautiful? It will be taken care of if we attend to the wholesome. This is lovely, very inspiring. Even without asking them, they will be taken care of. To succeed, we need to cultivate a good reserve of healthy seeds. So every time you're meditating and practicing mindfully and really moving back into alignment of the wholesome seeds that you're planting, they will bear fruit. You will experience the karma of that. And it does kind of take care of the unwholesome seeds. So there are seeds that are planted, and whatever seeds are planted, consciously or unconsciously, they do generate the predominant thought patterns, the habitual thought patterns that create the world of our experience. It's really profound, isn't it? It becomes our world. It becomes the world we live in, and it's all that we see. You know, the confirmation bias. I want to talk a little bit about current neuroscience and how the Buddha, this is 2000, over 2,600 years ago, it's all being supported in current modern neuroscience. It's kind of cool, isn't it? The Buddha was really saw all this, really saw it through deep practice. What he saw is, you know, as we think, so we become. The neuroscience way of saying this is what fires together, wires together. Whatever intentionality is flowing in the mind, that becomes the neural patterns that become strengthened, and they become our habitual. That's where we hang out in the mind. That's what we know. What's good about this is that because of neuroplasticity, this is the liberating factor of our practice. Because of neuroplasticity, we know that this can be changed in the present moment, depending if we become mindful. We can completely reprogram these mental patterns, and we can literally shape the brain physically and the mind. We can change those neural pathways. Now, it takes some practice, doesn't it, everybody? Do you know what I mean by that? Those patterns, they're deeply embedded. They're neural, they're physical, and they feel real, don't they? But through neuroplasticity and through mindfulness, mindfulness is one of the only things, I think it's why it's become so popular in research currently, is because it can rewire the brain. Remember, you can be sitting in your practice and there can be you can be in touch with a negative, unwholesome mental pattern, but you can rewire that by returning back in the present moment to a wholesome condition in relationship to that. And it will change the whole pathway. When people, and this is probably some of you know this, I teach MBSR and different practices, different courses. It's radical to know that after 8 weeks of practicing, the brain changes physically. There's just something real to this, that the parts of the brain in the brain stem that are associated with stress and worry and all those negative patterns, right? That shrinks. And the prefrontal cortex, where all of our best self lives, so the compassion, discernment, wisdom, this here in the prefrontal cortex, it thickens. So do you see this shift in the brain, and that it really does start to feel different, and you experience a lot of things differently, and your view of the world is different, and you suffer so much less. And you can be of service in the world, right? So isn't this wild and good? Doesn't it feel like when we're practicing, we're really kind of like, okay, come back to that main thing, and how sacred and profound that is. I want to talk a little bit about working with thoughts as we practice, because they can be tricky, can't they? Did anyone notice their mind thinking and wandering away from the breath as we practiced this morning? I'm wondering, yeah, let's just common humanity. This is literally what we're doing, is we are really shifting and creating new wholesome patterns. So thoughts can be tricky because those negative, habitual, often unwholesome, unconscious patterns, they often run like we're asleep at the wheel and they're running, right? Do you know what I mean by that? They're just kind of driving the car of our life, and we're not really very present with it, but they're just kind of driving the car. These are the thoughts, these predominant patterns. When we practice, we get in touch with them, we get to see them. This is a beautiful part of what we're learning to liberate ourselves from. We do have to know it first. It can be painful, but that's where the kindness and the wisdom comes in, to hold it for transformation. But thoughts can be tricky. They can derail our deepest intentions. So I wanted to demystify them a little bit. I wanted to help with breaking the spell. Do you ever feel like when those habitual mental patterns take over, you're kind of under a kind of a spell or a trance? Does anyone know what I'm talking about there? So I want to demystify them by saying that they've done research on this. And what do you think is the percent of thoughts in our mind that are repeated? Does anyone, repetitive, does anyone have a guess at that? Some of you may know this already. Yeah? It is about 95%. Let this blow your mind. Please let this blow your mind. Our thoughts in our mind, 95% of them are repetitive. It's old stuff. It's just based on the past. It has nothing to do with what's actually happening in the present moment. Do you feel your mind kind of wake up when I say this? It's not really reality. The other thing, and maybe some of you know this, what do you think is the percentage of the thoughts in our mind that are negative? What do you think, everyone? What did somebody say? Okay, go ahead. About 3/4? Yeah, I mean, it's 80%. And that's because a lot of these habitual mental patterns tend to operate out of unconscious and often unwholesome patterns, right? Negativity and judgment. How many of you have a strong inner critic? Does anyone have that operating? And this can all be healed through our practice. I want you to know it all can be liberated, and that a lot of it is really not based on any kind of reality or truth. So we're learning to break the trance of some of these thoughts. I'll share with you that when I was on meditation retreat, one of my very first ones, and I was up at Spirit Rock. Has anyone been to Spirit Rock? I'm curious. Oh, yeah. Many of you have. It's very beautiful there, right? It's beautiful. And I remember it was one of my first retreats, very long time ago, but I'll never forget it. I went and it was so beautiful there. I thought, oh, I'm going to have such a great time. I'm going to have such a great retreat. But what happened was, as I started to practice, I was just completely under the storm of my habitual mental patterns, because that's what's running the show. That's what's been driving the car. I really had to get in touch with my untrained mind, right? And what I noticed was that even though it makes me want to cry, even though it was very beautiful there, I was in hell. Does anyone recognize what I'm saying? And I walked around, staggering around. And I thought to myself, my God, it's not what is happening. It's my own mind. And it was very humbling. It was very clear that it was not where I was or what was happening. And I remember finally gathering myself with that understanding and sitting in the meditation hall. I don't think anyone was in there. I think it was like during lunch, because I was just really spinning. And I sat in the hall and I got quiet enough. And somehow my mindfulness was able to be established within my experience. And I had a moment, almost like a thunderbolt moment, where I saw my mind. And I remember my eyes opened and I just went like this. It was such a profound insight that I saw that my thoughts were insane. I really saw it. Like, I saw, and it liberated my awareness. I must say that those patterns, they still can take over. I'm not saying that's not the case, but the insight was so strong that it broke the spell. And I don't think I really want to go there anymore. Do you understand what I mean by that? It's good to see it in awareness if we're mindful enough to see the truth of our thoughts. So that's good, because then it paves the way for deep intentionality, so we can drop to a deeper place of knowing that can start to steer our boat. I love this, this quote from the Buddha. Listen to the power of this as we start to drop down into the main thing, right? The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, and the habit hardens into character. Do you see how the intentionality starts to create our mental patterns? So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. As the shadow follows the body, as we think, so we become. So do you feel how beautiful and powerful this can be when we start to drop into much, much deeper material? I love this. On a lighter note, I love this cartoon. It's a Winnie the Pooh cartoon. I love Winnie the Pooh. Pooh, he says, they're Winnie the Pooh and Piglet are walking together hand in hand. What? And Pooh says, Piglet, there's nothing in this world that can hurt you as much as your own thoughts. And then Piglet says, very wise. Piglet says, but Pooh, there's nothing in this world that can heal you as much as your own thoughts. So do you see how this is really up to you? The thoughts can be wholesome and there can be the full path to awakening and freedom. It really depends on if you're awake or asleep at the wheel in any moment. What seed are you planting right now? It's really beautiful, isn't it? So it depends. It could go either way. I want to just look at our time. So just to give you a sense of the karmic unfolding of how this can be, we can notice this in our moment-to-moment experience, how intentionality plays out and how we either suffer or we don't suffer. And we can feel into the karmic result. And so, for instance, I'm sure all of you know the experience of when you say something to somebody that is not skillful. Does anyone know what that feels like here in the room? We all do, don't we? So number one, there's like three parts to this. The first part, in the immediate moment when you say something unskillful, does everyone feel the unpleasant result of that? You feel it, right? That's the karma. And there's the likelihood that that response arising in a future situation becomes strengthened. It feeds that pattern, right? Every time we act on these intentionalities, it feeds it. It strengthens it. Number two, there is a result that comes back to you. Often it will push the people that are away from you, right? There is the result of that, the karmic result, along with your own suffering that you feel. And three, when you look back and reflect on that unskillful action, it doesn't feel good, right? So it continues to haunt you. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah, but that you can see just how one seed has so much power in it, in how it affects you and others. But suppose you plant a seed that comes out of kindness. You say something really skillful and kind. It feels good in the moment, doesn't it? It's a kind act. Doesn't it feel good when it comes from a wholesome place? And suppose you plant, and the likelihood of that rising again in the future is strengthened. And number two, the energy that comes back to you is wholesome. You feel a deeper connection with the other person, right? And that's beautiful. And three, when you reflect on it, it feels good. So it's really nice. So this is how this plays out. And we do want to pay attention and to know it, to bring awareness, mindful awareness to all of this so that we can begin to really direct our lives, the course of our lives. And intentionality really allows us to ask and to drop in and to know, are we on course towards less suffering or our deepest aspirations? Are we or are we not? And how do you know when you've gone off course, everyone? How do you know? I know for myself, I start to suffer. It just feels like I'm in the weeds. Do you know what I mean? I find myself in the weeds. And I want to say that it's not like that doesn't happen anymore for me, but I will say this, I notice it so much quicker and I get out so much faster and I get back on track right away. I just can really, really quickly untangle and find and get back on course. I like the Buddha uses with intentionality, this another great metaphor, the analogy of the cart. Often, we really do have for ourselves intentions of going north, going in that direction. That's what we really aspire to in a really wholesome way. And yet what we find is that in our actual living, in our actual moment to moment experience, our cart is facing south. Do you guys know what I mean by that? We're not in alignment. And intentionality allows us to really pivot the cart into the right direction, literally in the present moment, in the here and now, not as a hypothetical, but literally doing that. There's something about intentionality that does feel like in the present moment, an energetic, visceral experience. It provides a pivot point. It provides the kind of moment of dropping back down in. And it's a very, for me, it's a very visceral experience. It's a really deep feeling to bring the cart back in to alignment and to drop back down in the present moment. It can only be found in the present moment. And it only really lands in the present moment. If we're asleep at the wheel and we're not present, it's not clear what's happening, right? So the intention allows us to find the active experience in the moment of dropping back into our heartfelt intentions over and over again. I did want to say, and I'll just say a few more minutes, and then I'll let us share and ask questions about this. There is a difference between goals and intentions, right, everyone? We don't want to get too caught up in striving for goals. Intentions are very powerful and a beautiful pivot point in which we can rest, actually, because goals are future destinations, but intentions come from deep inside the heart, deep inside our being. And they're always here in the present moment. They're not changed. It's like the thread. It's like that poem. They're not changed by external conditions. They can be found in any moment. You can drop into there as refuge, right? I think goals come from the head. Intentions come from the heart, from a much deeper place. I like to think of intentions almost as coordinates for a satellite dish. Do you guys know that image of a satellite dish? Oftentimes, sometimes I just find the inner compass, the inner coordinates, those qualities, and I just let the dish do this, right? And then I let go. Intentions really drop in and then they let go. They're complete in themselves when we drop in, and there's no need to really manipulate how they're going to unfold. They will if we drop in. It may not unfold in the way we think it should, but they will. I also like this image of when we have clear intentions, it's almost as, in life, how many of you feel like in life without intentionality or without a practice, we're often like a small boat cast into a vast open sea? Does it feel that way sometimes? That external conditions are just, casting us all over the place and we have no control over where we're going. It's like a victim mentality and life is just happening to us, right? This is how it can feel without intentionality, without a practice. And that intentions are often like putting your hand on the rudder of the boat. They really kind of they really are a visceral thing of really anchoring in and putting your hand on the rudder. And before you know it, you start to have, it's like returning a power back to yourself, taking your power back. And you start to begin to keep your course on boat and you keep your hand on that rudder. And it really starts to safely move you through any storms of life. I think without intentionality, we really feel like we're cast adrift, right? We can really get lost in the storms of life. And there are a lot of storms right now. I will say, I don't want to get too much into, politics and things like that, but isn't it incredibly important right now to have your hand on the rudder for what is wholesome for you and to not let the storms, cast you about more than they need to? It's really important to find our wholesome intentionality at this time on the planet for so many reasons. So I was going to say some other things, but I like this quote. I like this quote from Pema Chodron, and then I'll open it up to questions. It's hard staying present. When we do become more mindfully present, as I shared in that retreat story, often we become mindful or aware of a lot of patterns that are very painful to be with, right, everyone? And when we slow down and when we really become present, a lot of the material wounds from our past, really in search of love and healing and integration, they do show up, don't they? But it's beautiful because they're coming for wholesome healing. They want to be held in wholesome intentionality. And that's how healing and transformation and freedom take place. But it can be hard. Often it doesn't feel good, right, to heal. Often healing doesn't feel good. But if we hold it with self-compassion and love, I can assure you that it does become an experience of healing and freedom. This is a quote from Pema Chodron. She says, "Welcome the present moment as if you had invited it. It is all we ever have. So we might as well work with it rather than struggle against it. We might as well make it a friend, a teacher, rather than our enemy." How does that sound, everyone? Do you feel how the intentionality can be shifted different? It can be, depending on our intentions, we can meet any moment, even very painful ones, as a friend and a teacher, not as an enemy. And it can make all the difference. I was going to say a lot more, but I feel like I've said enough. I feel like it's a very, very important factor. Don't you all agree? And that it can make such a huge difference. I'll end with a quote by the Buddha, and then I want to open it up to questions. And then we might go into groups where we can share about what is the main thing so that we can strengthen our intentionality. This is a quote from the Buddha. He says, "Intention is active not only in the things we do and say, but also in what we think. It's the force. It's the force that drives action through the body, speech, and mind." Think about this. It's what is driving everything. It is the rudder of a ship. It even directs our attention to determining what we attend to. So really beautiful, beautiful, deep intentionality that I think is so important for us to tap into at this time. So I want to open up to any questions or sharing that people have on this theme. And then we can share in small groups, because as we come and practice together, it's so great to get to know each other and to create community, to make nice connections. Spiritual friendship is what we're here to also cultivate. So beautiful. So any questions from anybody online or here about anything that I've said? Yes, Mona. Let's let you have a mic if possible. Thank you so much. Ooh, when I do that, I can hear myself. Mona, yeah, here she. Thank you.
What was the source of the Thich Nhat Hanh seed metaphor?
You know, I think it's a book. It's from one of his books. But you can Google it and find it. All you need to do is Google Thich Nhat Hanh planting seeds intentionality, and it will come up. It's kind of a famous quote from him. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah, over here. Thank you.
Good morning, Lisa.
Good
Beautiful,
morning.
beautiful talk. It happens to be one of my favorite topics. And I mean, a lot has come up, but I'll be brief. The thing that I feel I struggle with sometimes is how to be deeply in the moment and at the same time allow like an intention for something that wants to manifest in the future. So that dance sometimes is challenging for me. And just this morning, I was torn between being here or working on a proposal that I'm supposed to submit that requires like a little bit of diving deeply into what wants to emerge. And I chose to be here, and it feels wonderful. And there's still something in my mind that says like, how about the planning, the investigating, the, for the seed to manifest? And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Beautiful. And so that project is also very wholesome, I sense. Yes?
Yes.
It's in alignment
definitely.
with your intentions and your practice. Yes.
It feels very challenging right now because, something, I'm being asked to create something that hasn't completely blossomed in the way that the expectation has been held
Yeah.
by the other parties. So, but I just want to say that that's present and it feels wholesome too.
Yes, of course. What I love, thank you for sharing that. Does anyone relate to what she is sharing, that you'll be present and something else kind of starts to, very worthy of attention, very important and good? You chose to stay present. How did that feel? Did that feel right?
It was really beautiful. When you asked, why are you really here? I mean, even the way you said it was so profound. I appreciate that very much. I took it like, why am I here in this life?
Yeah. Yeah.
And somehow it took me to the womb of the Amazon. I'm from Brazil, and I've been feeling drawn to go back in the wilderness.
Beautiful.
And so, yes, it was amazing.
Beautiful. So I think your experience is somewhat the answer, because in the present moment, as you're mindfully aware of all of these things, it is really for you to really determine in that moment, it will change. What feel you will know if you stay true to the deepest thing inside. And there's no argument, I think, when you really let that guide your practice. There may be times where that needs attention, and that's the focus, and it feels right to do that, and it's worthy of your attention. But it depends. It really does. But I think what's beautiful about what you're sharing is that you knew, and you followed that, and you stayed with that, and it felt right. And I would say that if we stay present in this way, you will always know.
Yeah.
And that will naturally, like that beautiful Thich Nhat Hanh quote, that will naturally take care of that project. You know, right? Because you're still in the process of it.
Yeah.
It will reveal itself without you having to work at it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
If you, right, with sometimes we have things that we have to make or do. That's my experience of that a lot. So I hope that serves you in your project and your practice.
Yes, very much so. Realizing that the pushing is not what needs to happen, but the being here and now will allow that to emerge. So thank you so much.
And it will probably allow you to create the project. It will flow for you out of your practice without you having to think about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Beautiful as well. Anyone else? Questions? Yeah. Oh, Ashley. Yes, thank you, Ashley.
Hey, I just wanted to say, like, I really was on with what you were saying about thoughts being tricky and being a strong inner critic with habitual mental patterns.
Yeah.
I've had a practice for over 2 years now, and I still find myself when I'm sitting being an inner critic of, are you doing this right? Or are you doing this wrong? Are you sitting correctly? Are you breathing correctly? are like, and all of those thoughts like take over sometimes when I'm trying to just focus on my breath. And it's difficult, and like those thought patterns carry with me throughout the day. Like, are you doing this right? Are you like, and all of that. And so I wanted to see if you could just speak a little bit more on those strong inner critic patterns.
Yeah. Who relates? Does anyone else here evaluate themselves, noticing thoughts of self-evaluation and self-criticism as you're practicing? You are in very good company, and thank you about that, and me as well. Yeah, we know this. So it's beautiful. I think from what you've said, and there's a couple things. You said sometimes you notice it and it doesn't take over as much, and you're able to let the breath stay central. Is that correct? Sometimes it's not as strong.
Yes, I've done 2 years of shamatha practice with a Tibetan group, so I'm able to sometimes let it go, but I find it coming back all the time. Like,
Yeah.
even sitting in a meditation hall in a retreat, it's like it's coming back to me like, okay, well, the other people around me, am I sitting the same way, or am I?
No, we could go on and
Yeah.
on. Yeah, okay. We could all do that, right? No, we totally get it. There is a beautiful strategy through wholesome intentionality in which you can actually really turn towards the inner critic with awareness, with your awareness. It can be the object of your meditation. Everything becomes an object for mindfulness. Nothing is a distraction. And this can be an interesting thing. We don't have time right now, but to turn the awareness to the inner critic and bring kindness to it and say, oh, you must be so exhausted. I bet it is. Sharon Salzberg says, how about a cookie and a cup of milk? And see what happens when you allow yourself, when you relate. Intentionality is the how we relate to anything that is present. And see if you can bring some compassion to that part of your being that's probably from early in life, probably reminiscent of early caregiver voices. And it's just been kind of wired in there. And it's probably trying to keep you safe and keep you loved. Probably is wanting the best for you. It's just maladaptive. And that you can turn to it and you can go, thank you. But no, thank you. I appreciate your work and what you're trying to do, but you're actually really stressing me out, man. Please go take a nap. But you have to be really kind to it or it'll stay. You have to really love it. And don't make it a problem. Do you feel what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
So we're bringing the intentionality to, I say this for the whole group because we all have this. We are bringing it to everything, this wholesomeness, this love, this kindness, even those parts that we want to run screaming from. Yeah, not easy. It's good to have support. Okay. Any last questions? I want you to be able to go into small groups. Yes. Oh, where is the mic? Oh,
I'm just gonna hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, I just had a quick question about connected to what you're saying. My mind doesn't, my mind typically goes to imagination when I'm meditating, and I am a writer. And so in those moments, I'm like, oh, yes, I must cling to that. I have to remember that. I cannot go back into the meditation because I need to remember that. So like, and so I'm like, is there some area of my brain that I could just remember that? And so then if I go back to the meditation, I really will forget it.
Yeah.
So is that just my mind? Like what's going on there?
Yeah, that's, does anyone else notice that who's a creative person or yeah. It can be really good and I think useful to have a pad of paper nearby when you meditate. And if there's some really nice things that come up, go ahead and just put them down and write them down, but then let them go. Because then you notice all that other stickiness that starts to, in the entanglement that starts to, and the striving and the greed and all that. So just see if you can stay mindful with it, write it down, and then drop back in.
That's so great.
Because I will also say that when we get out of our own way, we become flows and channels for great stuff. So I say that's wholesome and good, but just work with it skillfully. Does that make sense? May you be an open channel for great stuff through your practice. Yeah. And we can't practice with that agenda too. Yeah, it'll happen when we're really out of our own way. And that's a gift. And that's wholesome, I think. Any last sharings or questions? Yes, yes. Let's see, we need to give you the mic. Yeah.
Lisa, how do you maintain the thread and sort of avert your gaze from the accidental and the random, the stuff we don't have any control over that can still happen to us? How do you keep your I'm sorry. How do you keep a handle on the thread despite how random and accidental things can be?
Yeah. It's true. It's not personal and there's no control. We have very little control. But what we do have control over is how we respond and how we relate to what's happening. That's it. But it is. But it makes all the difference in the world, independent of external conditions. It makes all the difference in the world. As we think, so we become. How we operate is what we experience. It's not based on external conditions. This is the Buddha's enlightenment. It's hard for us to believe, isn't it? Isn't it? It's hard to believe that. We think it's out there. We really think it's out there. It's not, according to the Buddha, but you have to see how that plays out in your own practice, in your own experience, and see if that is so for you. Profound question. Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit from what you and I were discussing, Lisa, and you had brought up about how when we cultivate the good qualities, it takes care of some of this negativity on its own. And it just had me reflecting on how, before practice and I didn't know about loving kindness and equanimity or mindfulness, or if I did know about these things, I kind of thought it was something that you can either have or not, but I didn't know these were like developable qualities. And so anyway, it would be that whenever I was struggling with something, I would go straight into just trying to, figure out a solution and kind of going into, if there's a negative emotion, like going into trying to figure out how to solve it. And it's just, I find it so interesting how, it's this different approach now of, okay, I have the ability to practice, and by sitting in meditation and things, it helps to grow the mindfulness, grow these other qualities of equanimity and things. And then if the struggles come up, then again, it's like you were saying, it's like, okay, there's a lot that I can't control and fix, and that's, not mine. And so the practice kind of helps me take care of that without getting involved in what's going on, like without the
Yeah.
situation having to be figured out, which
it-
oftentimes I couldn't figure it out.
It
of course.
holds that differently for you. It's held in a much different kind of awareness. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's time for a bigger ship, Need a bigger holding. Right. We need a bigger ship right now. Yeah, we do. So I know that our time is up. But I love to you all. I just want to dedicate the merit of our practice today, all of us here, for the wholesome unfolding in the world today, in your lives and in the lives of everyone. May all beings find peace, be safe and protected and loved. May all beings be free, and may it be so. May there be justice and freedom and wholesomeness in the world. And this is the fruit of our practice. Walk in this way in every moment of your life and let it be so. It's really good, right? I hope you're inspired to practice and to stay wholesome at this time for all the right reasons. Thank you so much, everyone. Much, much love. You all get a big, big hug. Yeah.